When you look at the protests, in the United States, in Australia, in the West, you've got people going out and protesting for Palestine, for Gaza. Of course, Hamas and Hezbollah were largely supported by Iran. And how do you reckon that these people who, were all about human rights in Gaza and, dead civilians in Gaza, they're utterly silent? Does the anti-Western pose of this evil regime create an allure for some people that say that they, at the very least, give it a pass? And I've even heard of cases of pro-Palestinian demonstrators attacking pro-Iranian freedom demonstrators in some places.
So that tells you and me and your viewers why democracy around the world is coming under such grave threat. It is because people who should be supporting the moral, the right causes during their own times, in their own eras, are completely misguided, and they are absolutely throwing their support behind the very forces that are undermining all the gains that our civilization has made in the 20th century and the 21st century, democracy being chief among them. So, everyone is wondering what's happening in the United States, what's happening in Europe, why are we facing so many weakening of democratic institutions? Well, this tells you part of it. It tells you that the people, the so-called progressives, who used to be on the forefront of all the important causes throughout the past century, have lost their way. And today, the Iranian public is suffering as a result of it.
Absolutely correct. But, our Iranians, the Iranians you speak to, I guess mostly the diaspora community, how do they feel about Trump and this sort of on and off kind of talking about, well, one day he might hit the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, the next day saying, well, apparently they've stopped the killing, so we might back off a bit. Does this add a level of uncertainty? What do you think the United States should do, if anything, or should the U.S. just stay back and, let this collapse on its own?
Uncertainty is an understatement. This is absolutely nerve-wracking to all the people who have been watching the last 2 weeks and the last 2 decades in Iran. I personally know an Iranian activist who last posted something on Twitter saying, "Goodbye, everybody. I hope to see you on January 8th. And every day that I have checked, she has not renewed her post. And I am incredibly worried about her well-being and her whereabouts. So the idea that a nation without arms can rise up and peacefully overthrow the greatest supporter of terrorism around the world is just a fantasy. And I think those who think that such a project can be done with a nation of unarmed people are simply dreaming of something that cannot actually materialize. Iranians can't possibly overthrow a very violent regime that has been carrying out acts of terrorism in and outside of its own borders on their own. So international support is essential, is mandatory, is vital for this to reach the success that it's supposed to. It doesn't need military deployment inside Iran. The nation is already out, they're already sacrificing, but they do need every bit of support that the international community can provide.
Roya Hakakian, thank you so much for joining me, taking the time to explain these events, and know that there's a lot of people here in Australia who are really looking forward to the day that regime falls into a free Iran. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on.